Hi everyone, my name's Foong and I'm the founder of Matchable. For my insight talk, I thought it would be more interesting if I asked someone to ask me some questions instead of everyone just listening to me talking for 20 minutes. So as we're doing COVID times and I'm in a bubble, I asked my other half, Akib, to ask me some questions to make it a bit more interesting. So we'll see how it goes.
Fantastic. So, Foong, tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name's Foong, as I mentioned. I am the founder of an impact startup called Matchable. And at Matchable, we specialize in matching companies and their employees with really unique and innovative skilled volunteering opportunities at nonprofits and impact startups. So, for example, if instead of going out and painting a fence or planting a tree for your corporate volunteering day, you wanted to help a social enterprise that was rehabilitating cocaine growers and farmers in Colombia to make them cocoa entrepreneurs and using blockchain to do it, then that's one of the projects we have live on our platform.
Wow. Well, tell us a bit about your journey to becoming the founder of Matchable and what led you to that position.
Yeah, so it all started a long time ago with my Oriental parents. I come from a very traditional family. My mum was a bit of a dragon mum, and I've probably said it a few times now, so hopefully she doesn't mind and she also knows. And my mum and my parents always wanted me to grow up and become a doctor or an accountant or a lawyer. And so I wanted to be a really good child, so I ended up doing that. So I went to university, I read law with French law, and then I didn't want to practice law, so I ended up becoming an accountant. I joined one of the big four firms in 2005 when I graduated, and I spent 13 years advising real estate and private equity funds on tax structuring for their transactions. And to be honest, for the most part, I really enjoyed it. I think the structure in big corporate is such that you're always pushing yourself at every level and feeling that you're growing personally and professionally. But in 2016, I made director, which is kind of the first level of leadership below partner level. And it kind of made me reassess whether where I was headed with my career was where I wanted to be, because once you make partner, you're kind of there for the next 20 years. And I realized actually being a tax consultant just wasn't where I wanted to be in 20 years' time. So I took a sabbatical for 3 months. And I decided to explore, and I always had this interest in startup world, so I had these side hustles. I had a blog called Suit and Pie, which was all about inspiring men and women during the Sheryl Sandberg Lean In movement. And when I was writing that blog, I was interviewing a whole bunch of people who I found inspiring, and I realized the people that I found the most inspiring were entrepreneurs. And that led me to create a community called Suits and Startups, which was all about bringing together people in the city and entrepreneurs so they could innovate and learn from each other. And that's how I ended up in startup world. So during my 3-month sabbatical, I decided to go and explore and see if I wanted to be part of a startup. I realized that I did, but I didn't want to be a financial advisor for a startup. I wanted to have my own startup. And so I also realized, being an accountant, I'm quite risk averse, that the chances of me failing as a first-time founder are quite high. So I ended up hanging out at a lot of incubators like Founders Factory and Entrepreneur First, and that's actually how I found this role at Matchable. So Matchable was actually a startup that came out of an incubator called the Good Lab, which was a collaboration between a group of innovation consultants called Good Innovation and 8 of the UK's largest charities and their innovation teams. So charities like the Red Cross, the RSPCA and WaterAid had all come together and tried to think of startup ideas that that would solve some of their collective problems as charities, but would also be startups that they could invest in, proving a model that they could invest in companies that were for profit but with purpose and actually make money that way rather than relying solely on fundraising. Yeah, so that's the long and short of it. They were looking for a founder in January 2019, and that's when I applied and I got the role.
Brave move.
Thanks.
Switching from a 13-year corporate powerhouse to becoming the founder of a startup, how did your dragon mum react to that? How long did she cry for?
My poor mum. I feel like maybe she did cry behind closed doors, but she would never share that with me.
Dragon tears.
The dragon tears. I think it did break her heart a little bit. It wasn't an easy decision to leave a career that you've been, working on for 13 years, to be honest. I always, for most of my life, felt like, being a partner was where I needed to get to and what I wanted to do. So actually realizing that it wasn't was quite a big change for me. And then also disappointing my parents as, in Asian culture or any culture really, it feels rubbish to disappoint your parents. And obviously their vision of what success looked like was very much, partner or like the top of any profession. So it was quite difficult. I got asked if I was lost, which I didn't feel lost at the time, but that was a little bit upsetting. But actually, now my parents have really come around. They've been amazingly supportive because they've seen how much happier I am doing what I love.
Perfect. Well, I guess after that sort of hurdle with your dragon mum, what's been your journey since Matchable started?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I became the founder of Matchable in January 2019. So I've been doing it, being the founder of a startup for over a year and a half now. It's been amazing, actually. So I was a solo founder. I was by myself with no team for most of the first year. I raised my first round of funding, which was my SEIS round, so 150k in summer of 2019, which in hindsight was actually, I'm so grateful for, because the funding that I raised then really took us through COVID. I hired my first part-time person in October, and then the rest of the team came on board in January. So we're now a team of 5. And yeah, it's been a real journey, lots of learning, lots of growing. Definitely being a solo founder is really hard, especially when you've never done it before. But actually having that team there now has been really transformational. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Well, I guess in terms of, you mentioned the fundraising, what was it like specifically raising funds as a female and BAME entrepreneur?
Yeah, I would say in ways it wasn't actually, I don't think it was any different from raising funds as hopefully, I didn't feel like I was necessarily at a disadvantage, even though all the stats point towards less funding going towards female and BAME entrepreneurs. But there were some situations that I got put in where I did feel like I was a bit different, or I wasn't quite meeting the criteria that people were looking for. But obviously there was no kind of outward discrimination, definitely not for me, so that was very lucky. I think one of the things that also worked in my favour was that at the time I was fundraising, there was a big move towards supporting female entrepreneurs. So a whole bunch of VCs who were specifically looking for to support female entrepreneurs, and it was quite a nice time to actually be female, because you could really leverage that, to be honest, to your advantage. So that was good. But I would also say there were situations where, you attend all these kind of like pitching events or pitch training, and it became obvious in some of those events that the kind of pitching that they wanted you to do was very much the kind of pitching that a guy or a non-BAME founder would be doing, in terms of, sort of bouncing on stage, wearing a hoodie, and, the kind of typical Silicon Valley kind of pitch, which isn't really for everyone. So that was an interesting experience.
Oh, so I guess just following on from that, did you find that going through the fundraising sort of round, you had to sort of change your style, or did you sort of change your style as you went through the process as a function of being female and BAME?
No, but I think if I had been pitching like 10 years ago, I would have. So, and the reason I say that is because I have done that in the past to fit in my corporate job. And I think now I'm older and wiser, I suppose, I'm less willing to compromise in terms of who I am and how I show up, actually. So I specifically decided, in doing this, that I was going to be as authentic as possible and as much myself as possible, and therefore I didn't change my style, but I could see how others might, and it can be very tempting, because if you do focus on certain types of numbers, or pitch in a certain way, you are more likely to get funding, and obviously that's what you need to survive.
Fantastic. I suppose now, changing subject, we live in this crazy world where COVID has engulfed the globe. Useful to understand how this has impacted your business, the direction that you've taken. I hear there's been a lot of pivoting. I hear weekly pivots.
You hear a lot about the pivots, sorry.
Talk us through these pivots.
Every day, because we've been in lockdown. We've definitely had to do a lot of pivoting. And just to explain a bit about Matchable. So as a startup, there's something, and you guys probably all know, but it's called product market fit. And as soon as you have that, then you have a thing that if you replicate it loads of times, you're going to make money. And we didn't have that pre-COVID. It's something that's constantly evolving, and you're constantly trying to kind of adjust your model to make sure, or to try and find exactly what it is that you can solve, the problem that you can solve, that people will pay you to solve. So pre-COVID, we had been focusing on targeting L&D in big corporate, actually, so learning and development teams. And the angle that we were going for was really around finding really innovative projects that would upskill staff and their employees for the future of work. So putting them in a completely different environment, completely different context, so that they could, learn how to learn, really, be adaptable, be creative, etc. And those were the kinds of skills that we would help employees get experience of. But what happened when COVID struck was that lots of companies were really excited about volunteering, because there was a big movement and a big demand from their employees to help within the community, but they also didn't have any budget for any kind of extracurricular, like L&D training. All the budgets had been put on hold. And so what happened was we got loads of meetings with people who were interested in volunteering, but they didn't have a budget to pay us for it. So in April, May, we realized this. So we actually pivoted from a B2B model to a B2C model temporarily, which was quite a big move for us. we started a membership model which was called Matchable on Lockdown. And we tried to get loads of people involved in volunteering, and we opened up our whole database of really incredible projects that are sourced by our nonprofits and startups lead, Sarika, and we kind of invited people to pay us a small membership fee for access to that database, matching, but also events. We did like a whole series on community and fitness. We had one-to-ones with PTs. And we were offering all of this kind of like a membership model. And it was a good experiment, actually. We had about 50 people who signed up and did pay us for 4 to 6 weeks. And it was amazing to see that demand. But at the same time, what happened was we realized that the market wasn't really ready for people to pay to volunteer. And especially if you don't understand, or you weren't, we didn't have the opportunity to explain how we were a little bit different from the usual kind of volunteering. What happened was we would also get, a few comments around like, why am I paying you to give my time? And totally understand that. And, it's not something that's very obvious in terms of what we do. So we didn't feel comfortable also asking individuals for money to do this when, just the whole context was kind of weird for us. And we decided to stop that model, actually. And but what happened was the way we had been matching people had been really great. We realized that by opening up our database, people could pick their own projects and they would be so engaged with that project that we could match them within a day. And that was amazing for us. So we actually said, why don't we bring this model now to our corporate clients? And we pivoted back to B2B. And so that happened in early June. We started trying to pilot this with companies. And we had our first pilot in July with a company called Sift, who just got put out by Indeed, the job recruiters. And it was very successful, and they've converted to a permanent client, and now we have pilots lined up till the end of the year. So it's been a real journey. I wouldn't say it was easy, but we've learned loads, and actually, through the pivot, I'm kind of, grateful in hindsight that that all happened, because we wouldn't have the model that we have now if COVID hadn't happened.
Fantastic. And how do you feel about the business now and in terms of the next steps for Matchable?
Yeah, I'm feeling really excited, actually. I'm currently finalising my pitch deck, so if anyone wants to, give feedback or needs tips on theirs, I'm always happy to share. So we'll be going out fundraising again in September. For £750,000 this time, but I think we're in a really nice position, actually, that we have traction and we have real customers who are paying us real money now. So getting closer to that ever elusive product market fit, but that's a great place to be, hopefully, touch wood, when we go out fundraising. So very optimistic about the future.
Fantastic. Well, I guess just coming to sort of an end and sort of summarising your thoughts, and especially around your top tips for other BAME founders. Obviously, you've talked about dealing with dragon mums, drastically changing your career, growing a business from nothing, hiring people. I suppose, what are your sort of top tips to other BAME founders?
Yeah, I think for me, there's definitely something around having your own definition of what success looks like for you. And I think for a long time, I thought that success, and not for a bad reason. I mean, obviously, I've been culturally brought up to believe that, success is, something quite specific, like becoming a partner at like a Big Four accounting firm. And that definitely is success for a very large number of people. But that was very much dictated by the culture within which I was brought up, and the beliefs and values that my family held, and what people would tell me, and also kind of like what I would tell myself. And I think going through this whole process, I've realized that, you know, I'm the person who has to live with myself day to day. So, you know, success should really be defined by what I feel is right for me. And that shouldn't necessarily, if it is being a partner at a Big Four firm, that's amazing. But if it's not, then that's also great, because it should be, you know, what you want of life, because you're the person who's going to have to live that, really, not your parents, or not what, you know, what other people or, you know, think is right. That wasn't very well articulated, but that was definitely one of my top tips. The other thing I would say is, having been through all this pivoting during COVID, it's to focus on, you know, where you want to get to, but being flexible on how you get there is quite important. I mean, we've been through a whole bunch of changes, and if you ever spoke to anyone in the Matchable team, they've been amazing, literally one day to the next, building new things, you know, not holding on to any ideas, so taking on feedback and really being agile and creative throughout the whole kind of lockdown period, I think has really taught us that if we know what we're going for and what we want to achieve ultimately, and for us it's very much around impact and helping as many nonprofits and impact startups achieve their mission, it doesn't really matter how you get there as long as you get there. So always be open to new ideas, open to feedback, and don't hold on too tightly to certain ways of doing things, because, you know, they definitely can change very quickly. Those are probably my top 2 tips.
Fantastic. Well, I think that wraps it up. This has been very educational for me. Even after
for you as well.
Even after 20 years, I feel I now know you a lot better. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Akib, for interviewing me, and I hope it was useful for anyone watching. I am always happy to grab a virtual coffee if you would like to get in touch. I'm at Foong at wearematchable.com. My email is, and my bio, and everyone else in my team's bio is at wearematchable.com, or I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn as well. But thanks so much for watching and your time.